Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 168. It's our weekly podcast. We discover all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Hey, everybody. This again.
Come on. It's been one GDC and you forget the protocol? Come on, man, you can do this.
Anyway, so that we do those things. we do podcasty things and talk about game audio-y things. Hey guys, long time no see.
Oh,
Indeed,
man,
it feels like hours.
and I think that's accurate. It has been hours, hasn't it?
Great.
I guess it's always hours technically.
Got to meet some people from the show. I see Michael Hoffman's in there. It was great meeting him and talking to him a couple of days in a row. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for coming up.
There's
not
Jeff
you, Michael
there.
Shapiro.
I figured.
What'd you say, Vince?
Oh, I also see Jeff in the chat there.
Yeah, got Daniel, Bop Till You Flop, all kinds of awesome people. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And hey, you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to say thank you to our sponsor, because I'm going to try to get into the habit of doing that right at the beginning of the show so there's no mistakes. I don't forget anything. Thank you, Isotope, for sponsoring the show. You always take good care of us. As a matter of fact, we have to do a giveaway here pretty soon and get ourselves back into the kind of flow of things. Check out isotope.com. They've got amazing tools over there we use every day. Thank you, Isotope. So I figured, guys, today we would just do well, I didn't even ask you how you've been, but I think it's because I know, because you're probably tired and I saw you just a couple of days ago. But we're going to do a GDC wrap-up show. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's wrap some stuff up.
Let's wrap some stuff up. Let's wrap the wrap-up. I'm hip. I talk like that now.
Oh, man. This is what happens after GDC. Okay.
We were wondering. So I have to explain. I'm laughing a little bit. I see Chase in the chat room going, "I'm not at home," and he's chatting in the chat room. But I was like, "Hey, is Chase coming?" We have this Slack channel that we talk on. Those who don't know. And I was trying to scroll through and find out if Chase was coming, because I couldn't remember if he said yes or no. But he is here. He's in the chat room because he's not home, because he's cool and he does cool things.
Too cool.
So let's start right from the top. Tuesday, I think. Actually, Vince, you got there Monday, didn't you?
I did get there Monday.
So what did you see on Monday that the rest of us didn't, and would be cool to tell everybody?
Wow, I don't know, actually. It's Monday was actually kind of a whirlwind for me. Going in and just grabbing badges and running into people. I have to admit, the vast majority of my GDC time was taken up by running into people I didn't expect to meet, as well as people that I did expect to meet. And the stuff that was going on Monday was pretty interesting. There's all sorts of cool things with Indie Games Summit and Production Summit and various boot camps. But I actually didn't attend any of the lectures there. Most of the time, I just hung out and found that if I waited in any particular space for 15 minutes, someone would say, "Hey, Vince!" And I would turn around and be excited to find someone whose name I would forget immediately, and then 10 minutes later it would come to me and I wouldn't feel so embarrassed.
So the trick is stalling for 10 minutes in that conversation until their name comes back, and then you can mention it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's actually great because usually someone else would come into the conversation and they would mention the name and it would be fantastic. But that's a problem on Mondays. Mondays, there are so many people who don't have their badges yet. So I can't just look down on their chest and be like, "Oh yeah, that's your name. Yay! Hey, Chris. Hey, Josh. Hey, whatever." Later on in the week, not so much a problem, but Monday, certainly.
Well, that's a problem for me even later in the week, because I want to remember the names, and I try very hard to remember everybody's name. But also with increasing age, that becomes more and more difficult. And there were a couple of times where I was standing in front of somebody going, "Oh my God, I've got to say, 'Hey man, how you doing?' or 'What's up, dude?' because the name has escaped me." And it always comes to me after a couple of minutes of panic, but that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
The badge is helpful. Although, I got to say, there's something about when you're in a conversation with somebody and you're holding their attention, looking in their eyes, and then you just look down and look down and look down. There's something very strange about that, especially when it's somebody you know really well and they like look down at your name. You're thinking, oh, all right, I see how it is.
I had actually given people this tip that there were a few people who took advantage of it. Basically, you have to tie up your lanyard in the back so that it's not so long. At the typical length, that badge is going to be resting on your belly button, or perhaps even a little lower than that, depending on your size, proportion. Bring that badge up. And there were a few people who actually did that, and it was great. Because the name would be right there, right next to their face, and it's not so obvious that I'm looking down. Nor are people thinking, "Oh, I'm looking at their crotch or something else there instead of their face." Whatever.
Yeah, I saw Twitter where somebody was saying that some people were so bold as to just reach down and like grab their own badge and flip it over. Some people are saying, "Hey, man, give some personal space." I never experienced that myself, but mostly badges were facing the right way. But I know I was guilty of tucking it in my sweater when I was outside. And then when I would come back inside, it would still be in my sweater. So I'm guilty of not giving that information a little bit. But anyway, so Monday, not a lot, just a badge running into people who didn't have badges. So let's start with Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday was great. I mean, Tuesday was the start of Audio Boot Camp. And that's always fun to check out. Did any of you guys check out any of the Audio Bootcamp sessions?
We were in transit.
Was it only Tuesday?
It was Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mike, I stepped on you.
Wouldn't be the first time. Audio Bootcamp, from what I remember, I think I went to it many years ago, and from what I remember, it's a very good survey level coverage of a lot of topics in game audio that are very useful for beginners or people who are just or coming into game audio from another type of music for media. I think it gets you up to speed very quickly.
Yeah, and that was definitely the case here. Although there were some nice things that I was a little bit surprised to see. So one of them was Audio Bootcamp, programming composers and composing programmers. So this was targeted at newbies, but specifically newbies to programming who might otherwise be somewhat decent at other parts of audio for games, whether it be design or composing. And it was just talking about, hey, here are some basic programming techniques. Here are some ways that you can go about learning programming. Here are some things that your programmers would appreciate you going into and expressing some interest in. So yeah, I consider myself a pretty good composer and sound designer, and actually a very bad programmer. I don't know best practices. I'm very good at hacking things together, and I'm very good at sort of working things out. But even in a talk that's ostensibly for beginners in the Audio Bootcamp, there were actually some really good fundamentals that were presented there that I was realizing, yes, I should definitely be more diligent about things like data structures and not just willy-nilly doing X, Y, and Z, which I sometimes do in order to hack things together. So that was actually one of the talks on Tuesday that I thought, oh, that's really good. And I'm glad that more people are recognizing the importance and value of programming as a supplement to their sound design or their composition chops.
It's a great question. If you are, let's say you're in high school now, or about that age, is there anyone in America who does not get some kind of education in fundamentals of some programming language, basic coding literacy? I mean, I get the impression that that is something that most American students enjoy during their secondary school education. Anyone know?
I would imagine that's the case. I'm guessing that's the case. I guess it depends on what the programming is. I really don't know what is the standard for high school students these days.
I would be surprised if there wasn't some component of that. If there's anyone out there who's a current high school student or younger and wants to clue us in, I'm curious about this, but hopefully those kind of talks, introduction to computer literacy, introduction to coding, hey, composers, you should wake up that left brain of yours and at least be able to have a discussion with programmers and understand some basic principles would be something that's no longer necessary. That would please me a lot. But at the time being, if there are still composers who feel codophobic, I guess as much encouragement as possible is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. I think it is also worthwhile noting that for that composing programmers talk, they were showing examples in C++. And I do know a lot of audio guys who are well versed in audio implementation and audio scripting, and they can do basic things with C# and Unity and other languages that are perhaps a little bit higher level. I think it does recognize the fact that for as awesome and as diverse the world of game development is, it's still C++ once you get up to the big leagues. Hey, you're going to be doing something that's eventually going to be put on a major console, or they have aspirations of making it multi-platform between PlayStation and Switch and Xbox. Yeah, you're going to be dealing with C++ at some point. So, I thought that was actually really nice there.
Right on. So what else was going on Tuesday in addition to the boot camps?
What else? I'm looking through the various sessions that I checked into. That was really the coolest one there. There were a couple of other primers in Audio Bootcamp. I did check out a couple of things happening in the producer bootcamp. And it was nice just getting a sense of what was going on the larger level. Always helpful to recognize everything that's going on in the team. But back on the audio front, there wasn't that much happening until the Game Audio meetup after hours. So I think I saw some people that I know, some other friends of the show, guys like, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Matt was actually there. I'm seeing faces in my head. Oh, let's see. Jeff was there. Jack was there. Jack Menhorn. A bunch of other guys that have been on the show at some point or have shown up in chat. They were in the Game Audio Denizens dinner that typically happens on Tuesday night of GDC, and that was a fun time.
We missed that, didn't we, Mike?
We missed just about everything. I think we rolled into town around 10 p.m., maybe like 8 p.m. on Tuesday night. But
I was trying to remember what we did. We just did dinner, didn't we?
Yeah, there's a dream of showing up at GDC Tuesday in the evening and then dusting yourself off and rushing off to a party or some kind of get-together with your colleagues. But after 5 or 6 hours on the road, all you really want to do is collapse in your hotel room.
That's so true. Well, let's move on to Wednesday then.
Well, Wednesday, I think you were there for that, right? Because a lot of GDC, for anyone that's involved in audio, starts off with a pastry or hot beverage at Sight Class Coffee.
It does. I ran right over there. I was there as the doors were opening. So nice. For people who don't know, Damian Kaspauer and Anton Volchek, how do you say his last name? I think it's it. From Guerrilla Games. They have a podcast, Game Audio Podcast, and they do a live recording of the podcast every morning during GDC at Sight Class Coffee on 7th, I think it is. And it's basically just, they call it an audio stand-up. You just go there and talk about cool things you saw yesterday, what cool things you want to go see today, and then just hang out and talk and drink coffee. And it's super fun. They've been doing it for years. And so I was very excited to get there. Very tired. I couldn't believe how many people were already there. It was really quite cool and great to see everybody. So that was the opening for me, was just getting to see old friends right there at Sight Class and learn about what I missed and get a hint on what I should go see.
Yeah, it's really helpful, just the look back and look ahead. Because there's so much that's happening during GDC. Tuesday is great because you have that single line of audio that is set up. It's in this room. You're going to be in that room. You're going to an audio talk. Not a problem. All throughout the rest of the week, starting on Wednesday, talks are going to be triple, quadruple booked. Oh, there's an audio talk at 1:30 here and here and here and here. And you have to pick and choose. It's so frustrating. I kind of wish GDC was smaller so that I don't have to do that sort of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, first world problems, right?
Well, we left Sightglass, and I had my first talk, which I'm looking right now to see what it was. One thing they need on this GDC app is they have this schedule area on the agenda, and you have agenda and my agenda. But then I'd like one more thing that says these are the things you actually went to see, because I fill up time slots with like 3 or 4 options just in case I'm at Hall C and I realize the time and I don't have time to get to Dub West or something, and I just want to pick something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to think of what I watched first thing.
Were the Composer Microtalks on Wednesday?
Composer Microtalks were actually Thursday.
Oh, wait, that's right. We went to, our first one was What's Next? A Game Audio Micro Talk series.
I think that's what I was thinking.
The audio Microtalks were in fact on Wednesday. The Composer Microtalks were on Thursday.
Had 10 speakers, and if I remember correctly, Dren was hosting it, right? I think he set it up.
Yep. Dren has been hosting it, I think, since the beginning.
It was a really interesting talk about. See, I'm kind of confusing it with the one where people were talking about mistakes that they made with some composers, but this was all about like what's next for each one of these persons, and that could be different. Like there was a voiceover artist named Sarah Elmale talking about her career and what she plans to do next, and there was just so many great ones that stood out. Karen Widener had great advice in that talk. I definitely recommend people go to the GDC Vault if you can and watch this. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm glad that so many of the audio things are in fact recorded these days. There was a time, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when they were really picking on choosing which talks would be recorded. And now pretty much everything in the audio track is recorded, except for some of the roundtables here and there, which is unfortunate, but hey, I'm glad that so much is recorded these days.
Yeah. Were we all in that same talk?
Which talk? The Game Audio Micro Talks, or?
Yeah, the micro talk of what's next that Dren set up.
Yeah, that is in fact recorded.
I was just curious if all 3 of us were there. I can't remember. It becomes a blur if all 3 of us were in the same talk or not.
Ooh,
I was there.
I was not there either because I kind of.
What'd you go see?
I went back and forth between the Nintendo thing, Splatoon, How to Invent a Stylish Franchise with Global Appeal, which honestly seemed a little bit fluffy to me. So I headed out after that and went across the street to South Hall for Game Audio Contracts Roundtable Day 1. And that was actually a pretty decent thing, although pretty entry. You probably heard a lot of this stuff before about different contract types, and they actually used as reference for the roundtable the sample audio contracts that are available at Hexney Audio. Mm-hmm. So you could go to that particular website, Hexney Audio, which is done by Kevin Regami and those guys. And they have a bunch of different contracts, stuff for licensing, stuff for a work for hire. And it has notations on where you can go and change things and amend things as needed. It's a very useful reference if you haven't seen it before.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a perennial talk, I believe. I feel like Hexney does that every year or some variant of that. And for anyone who hasn't been, I almost think it's obligatory. It's so well done. And the fact that they get to polish it every year means that it's a really tight and focused talk.
Yeah. I think besides just the talk, those contracts that they had up there, it's been up there for about 3 or 4 years. And now the versions that you can download are really great. They have also benefited from the years of iteration of this roundtable and working. It's pretty great.
Well, moving on, I went to a talk I drug Mike to at 11 o'clock called The Demonic Sound of Paranormal Activity, The Lost Soul.
Oh.
And I have to say, you know, I'm addicted to being honest. It wasn't my favorite talk. I thought it could have been done a little bit better. I was really excited to get in there, but there wasn't enough about how the sounds are created. It was just basically showcasing the game and playing sounds and talking about decisions that were made to put sounds like that in those locations. But I was looking forward to actually seeing what kind of tools they used and stuff like that. Anybody else go to Demonic Sound of Paranormal Activity?
Well, you dragged me there, so yes.
Anybody other than Mike?
I didn't. Yeah, I did not check that out. I think I was somehow caught up in something. Did you have a similar feeling, Mike?
I liked a lot of the technical explanations for the kinds of things they did. The more mundane the sound design in that game, the more interesting I found it, which is a little counterintuitive. But things like creating the outdoor ambience when you're walking around this I guess, haunted house, the sounds of the outside, and when the rain's pouring down, and how your perception of the rain pouring down is different if you're by a window. You know, all the little details that go into creating a sense of immersion in a creepy, macabre reality. I was really impressed by that stuff. As it turned to the more supernatural, you know, demons and whispering voices in objects that you pass in the invariable nightmare screen, it still seemed pretty solid to me, but it was much less interesting. It was much more generic. And it made me think that in sound design, we are so inundated with hyper-real sound design, you know, dragons screaming and monsters and explosions, that I almost feel like the real opportunities for creativity are the subtleties that are embedded in the more mundane, down-to-earth stuff. Ambience and footsteps, etc. You can stylize those in a way that reinforce the tenor and mood of the game. You can make everything a little bit creepy if it's a creepy game, or everything a little over the top if it's an over-the-top game. And I think that subconsciously, this probably has a bigger impact than all the explosions and monsters screaming at you, just because we're so used to hearing the latter kind of sound. So I found that was a very interesting part of the talk.
Yeah, that does sound pretty good there. Cool. Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with the game. And also, I'm scared of playing horror games. Any sort of creepy games. I actually am very worried if I ever somehow get hired to work on a horror game, because it would be absolute hell for me to test it. I'm not sure how I could ever deal with implementation on that thing.
I've worked on a couple of horror games, and that is absolutely the truth. It's frightening to go through the level and try to find your sounds and make sure they're working. But what's good about a talk is it's not scary there. I mean, if you're scared at a talk, I can't help you.
Well, it depends who the speaker is.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what I went to next. I don't know if it's a good are we doing a good thing by going down our schedule and just talking about the things we like? I guess that's a game that seems like a GDC wrap-up kind of show.
I think we both went to same game, different sound, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that was so good. I really enjoyed that.
How was it? I missed out on that too. What do you guys think?
Kyle,
what time was that? Oh yeah, that was 2, right?
That was Wednesday at 2 p.m. Did I jump ahead, or are we still
on?
Did
something in between? Probably 8.
Sorry, did I jump ahead? Are we on Wednesday, or are we still on Tuesday?
No, we're on Wednesday. We just left 11 o'clock. I think we didn't do anything at 12, and we just waited till 2.
Probably at lunch, yeah.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Mike. Same game, different sound.
So the idea behind this talk was really interesting. A number of composers were all given the same movie kind of gameplay animation, maybe a minute or two of some game from Japan that with which very few of us are familiar. It was kind of a mashup of a prehistorical environment with high technology. So there were kind of like orc-like things in a woodland glen, and then a dragon overhead. But the protagonist was, I think, firing a combination of high and low tech. So a fairly open palette. You could interpret it a number of different ways. And each composer wrote a different musical accompaniment for the gameplay video they were given. I don't remember if they also did sound design. Do you remember that, Kyle?
No, my belief is that they did not do sound design, because there was a couple of times where they played it with sound design and without sound design to show what the composers were doing.
Well, it was really interesting to see the different interpretations that the composers took with the same exact footage. And what's cool about a demonstration like this is to reinforce the idea that there is no one way to score a moment in a game. There are as many valid approaches as there are composers, modulo the number of producers who will actually give a thumbs up to those approaches. But the selections that we saw were really interesting, and they were quite different from each other. Inan Zur, the renowned game composer, he delivered his musical approach in absentia, and he recorded a video greeting everybody as an apology for not being there. He did a fairly traditional, I think what we'd find in kind of an action RTS or something like that. Sorry, like an action FRP, a mixture of some punctuated drums and some faster moving stuff and a little bit of synth. It fairly common sort of hybrid approach that was very effective in leaving room for the sound design to be heard on top of the music. I know that Jason Graves did something that was much more contemporary. There was electric guitars and other stuff that ilk. I don't quite remember the other two composers' approach. There was Arnold Nessus and Becky Allen from PopCap. Kyle, do you remember either of those takes on the scene?
Yes. So Einan went first, and then I believe it was Jason Graves who had a guitar-based composition. And then Arnold went, and then Becky Allen went. And Arnold's was very, it was orchestral, but it was punctuated with that heavy kind of metal guitar throughout. It had a real edge to it, and it was kind of Gears of War-ish, just really, really heavy and dark, as if a metal band decided that they wanted to write some orchestration rather than, an orchestral person adding guitar. And it really fit the mood. He really did a great job. And I'm always honest. It's not my favorite type of combination of music and I think it's because as a guitar player, it's something that people will default to. And when I speak to them about playing guitar on a soundtrack, I have a feeling that in the back of their brain, they're thinking, I don't need, some more dark, heavy metal guitar. And it's like, that's not what I'm offering. So I think that perhaps I have a bit of a prejudice against that sound because I'm afraid that it paints guitarists into the wrong corner. But he did really well with it. Jason Graves with the guitar part, his was filled with guitar. And what I liked about his was that it was a really interesting choice that he was making, but I felt that his might have been the weakest of the four. And I have a lot of respect for his ability. He was just really kind of reaching outside the box and taking a chance. And that's what this kind of thing is for, which I thought was great. Einan Zur was my favorite one until Becky Allen did hers. And I thought she did fantastic. Hers ended up my top. So it started with Einan, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it went to Jason with the guitar, and I was like, well, it's good. It's an approach that's coming from a different angle. And it went to Arnold Nessus, and I thought that was good. It just fell into a category that I'm kind of hesitant with. And then it went to Becky Allen, who explained everything. She did this setup where she was talking about she took just a minute. She wished she would have paid more spent more time with it. I was going to say paid attention. Obviously, she paid attention, but spent more time with it. And then she played it, and I was like, wow, that's fantastic. She really did a great job. I have to be honest. And I liked hers the best. What do you think, Mike? You don't have to name your favorite.
Well, I unfortunately, I don't remember the latter two. I mostly remember Inan's and Jason's. One thing that I thought was really interesting was that the video itself had a kind of climax to it, in that there's a moment where time slows down dramatically. Everything kind of grinds to a halt, and then you see a dragon emerge overhead. He's flying. And I assume this is meant in game to be a direction of our attention, to say, okay, you're in real trouble, better get out of here. And in the video, we see the player does not confront the dragon. So this is obviously an introduction to something that's going to happen later. But the different composers took different approaches to handling the reveal of that dragon. And just to emphasize, time is slowing down. There's a real visual emphasis on that dragon. I believe almost everyone put some kind of hit on that dragon, some kind of really big emphasis to say, oh my God, dragon. But what's really interesting to me is when they played the actual music from the game, the music was very unresponsive in that when the dragon appeared, I believe the music just faded out. There may have been just some event trigger and there was no music after that. So the kind of emphasis you got, possibly unintentionally, was the dragon flying overhead in silence and the music just fading away. It's possible that one of the composers did that intentionally as well, but I mostly remember this effect from hearing the actual music for the game. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, the dragon is much scarier without music. If everything kind of grinds to a halt and we're just listening to ambient sound in this dragon, it's really chilling. So it's an interesting, if unintentional, lesson about how the absence of music can sometimes be a very powerful emphasis, especially so if we've just heard nothing but music for the early phases of combat. So to suddenly pull it back and have our auditory attention focused just on the dragon, it's an interesting kind of punch. So something to keep in mind, you composers out there, when you're thinking about how to accent something that is meant to be dramatic.
True indeed. Sorry about the interruption. I just got a scotch drop off.
Old Pulteney, huh?
Old Pulteney, hit and run.
All right.
They should
I really
sponsor
wish
the
I could
show.
have been there. That sounds like it would have been a really good talk to check out. And unfortunately, I was not there. It seems to have been the thing for me. I had various talks scheduled, and I wouldn't go because...
But you had a lot of meetings.
Well, I mean, a lot of impromptu meetings. Yeah, that's the thing that I had to run with at GDC. In previous GDCs, previous years, I would have to let people know, oh, by the way, I'm going to this talk. By the way, I'm going to this talk, blah, blah, blah. This time around, I went to very few talks because I just decided, hey, this chat is going to run over, and that is all right. This is going to be cool. He or she is an interesting person. Let's let this conversation run its course, and it will be fun.
I think it's a very valid way to go because
Absolutely.
Almost all of us are at GDC to forward our careers in some capacity, and that often happens through one-on-one conversations, and we can't always anticipate those conversations. So being flexible about what you do is often a great asset in terms of networking.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, very much so.
At 3:30, Mike, I'm looking at my schedule. Maybe I went to something that you had on your schedule and wasn't on mine, but at 3:30 there was a talk called Giving Up Control, Zen and the Art of Leadership. I really wanted to go to that because I think a lot about that subject and how to be how to manage a team or a project by being hands off and being comfortable with letting people who are skilled take control and do what they've been brought in to do. Did anybody go to see that talk in the chat room or otherwise? And it's definitely one I'm going to revisit the vault and watch.
I did not. That sounds very cool, though.
Doesn't it? What did we do then next after that? I don't think we Mike and I split up a bunch too because of meetings and different interests. But so I don't know what happened after that. I'm starting to look through this list, and I'm not seeing anything that I went to after 2:00.
Well, the end of my day, I actually ended up talking to another game producer, and he said he was going to a talk, so I actually ended up following him, and that talk ended up being weaving 13 prototypes into one game, lessons from Edith Finch, which some of you guys might have played. It's on PS4. It's pretty cool. It's also absolutely bonkers crazy because it's basically 13 whole separate game mechanics in a single game. And I can totally understand why a game designer or a game producer would want to check that out and see how they actually wrangled that thing together. And it was a pretty good talk. Not too much on the audio front there, although he did make mention, he being Ian Dallas, the lead over there at Giant Sparrow, mentioned the power of audio to just make things work. The way he described it was, oh, it's like sprinkling magic fairy dust and it automatically seems good. What the heck? So, yeah, I thought that was actually really quite funny.
And true.
There was one talk on Kyle, I think you went with me to this one. At 5 o'clock on Wednesday, there was the classic game postmortem, Bard's Tale 1 and 2.
Mm.
And for those of you who are not a million years old, these were two seminal first-person RPGs for, I want to say 8 and 16-bit computers. I think you could play them on like your Commodore 64/Apple II, and they ported them to the Amiga and I'm guessing Atari ST. And
the NES. I played mine on the NES.
You know, Mike, you're breaking my heart just by explaining what this game is.
I know. We have to, not everyone in our leadership, our listenership is going to have some experience with these games.
I feel so old and like
years.
So like get off my lawn kind of old manish. It's like, how do you not know what Bard's Tale is? But so you're right.
Now, Bard's Tale as a brand has continued throughout the years, but you're not really, unless you're thinking of the original 2 games, I would argue, you're not really putting your finger on the essence of what these games were.
Yes, so you need to be in a bedroom with 4 other people living in the house eating ramen, and in the SCA making your own boiled leather armor, playing this game all night while you work at a wine shop in Buellton, California. Not to get too close to the mark here.
Well, that's a fairly universal experience that we've all had. So these games, I'm going to make a musical analogy. If Wizardry was like Haydn, then Bard's Tale were like Mozart, in that they didn't innovate this genre. Like the Wizardry, and even older game, really kind of innovated the genre of Dungeons and Dragons-like experience on your computer. And that was like Haydn, the first person to really kind of organize and systematize this idea. And Bard's Tale perfected it and moved it forward. So it was a very classy, very graphically oriented, first-person town/wilderness/maze exploration game. So I don't know about you guys, but I regard the classic game postmortems as some of the most fun talks at GDC. And for me, there are 2 reasons. One is sheer nostalgia, which is an indulgence we all enjoy at some point in our lives. And the other is a glimpse into gaming history, because you can really learn a lot from listening to the developers describe how they got their franchise or their product established, how they made a relationship with a publisher or developer, and what lessons from the Wild West days can go forward to today. And what I often find from these talks is that the guys who succeeded, the people who succeeded, were often very headstrong and very flush with belief in the power of their product. We saw this as well later on when we went to Richard Garriott's talk, but it seems like this is a common thread. The people who had a can-do attitude, who never for once doubted themselves, and maybe were even a little arrogant about the potential of their idea, were the ones who survived and who therefore go on to do classic game postmortems 30 years later at GDC. And such was the case with Michael Cranford from the Bard's Tale lore. And he was another self-advocate, someone who really believed in what he was doing. He saw a vision of taking the tradition started by Wizardry, the first-person multi-character D&D-ish game, and bringing it to the next level in terms of depth and what you could do in the world and the kind of characters you could have. And as with most of the postmortems, I really enjoyed that aspect of his talk. Kyle, what did you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a really interesting history that he knew Fargo. I can't think of his first name. Brian, right? Fargo. Who went on to make Shadowrun and all kinds of amazing games. That they grew up together. I kind of love that aspect of like the Beatles, like John Lennon and Paul McCartney grow up, and George Harrison grow up in the same town, and create this amazing thing. And it was kind of like that. It's like right place, right time. I'm really fascinated by that. Yeah, I thought the talk was really interesting for quite some time. We had to break out of there early because we had a dinner to attend. But I thought it was pretty good overall. There was a later one, the wizardry one, I really enjoyed.
Hmm.
There was a talk on wizardry.
What'd you say?
Did you say there was also a talk on wizardry, or are you thinking?
Oh, sorry, I meant Ultima Online. Sorry,
Ultima Online. Yeah, that was a great
crossing thoughts.
Just a random thing here. I was not at the talk, but I am a fan of The Bard's Tale. First of all, did any of you guys notice the audience? Do you think that it was mostly people that were a little bit older than the game itself, as opposed to, were there any young whippersnappers in their 20s attending this talk?
I don't know if I paid much attention to the demographic of the turnout.
Well, that's okay. On a little more musical oral note, I think it's really funny that the music for The Bard's Tale was actually written by someone who's not necessarily known for music, but ends up as one of the great game designers in the history of video games. This guy named Larry Holland, who was the designer who helmed all of the flight simulators for LucasArts. So all those games like Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, and of course the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series of games, that was him. Great. But his early start, The Bard's Tale music.
Wow.
What was really fun about those days is that the means of playing music on old computers was so simple. Like you've got a 3-voice SID chip on the Commodore 64, and then on the Amiga you had sort of 8-bit samples and maybe 4-voice polyphony. Things were so simple that the barrier to entry for composers was actually lower, because if you could write simple music, you were already bopping your head against the ceiling of what was possible. So simple melodies and very simple from the heart accompaniments actually could be the state of the art of game music.
Yeah, certainly.
Indeed. It's funny though, in those early days, I got my start doing art when I first came into games, doing what they call it. I want to say pixel art, but they call it bit mapping is what I think they called it. It's funny, people start in different places and then just hopefully stay alive and keep working. I want to punctuate this conversation, as awesome as it is, and as much as I love going deep on these talks. Let's go to like 7:15, because I know we started late, to try to keep it near an hour, and we're at 6:50 or approximately. So then afterwards, and I wanted to spend some time. So we had dinner. So I've been arranging these annual, or not annual. It's like anytime I see the Fat Man dinners, I drag that guy out. And we went to Amber, India, and the Fat Man was the guest of honor. I need to get him on the show actually. So we had this fantastic dinner, and this is what GDC is all about for me. I think that's the most memorable part, is hanging out with my friends, seeing friends I don't see very often, having a dinner, hanging out with a Fat Man, and just shooting the shit, and just having a great time. That was just amazing. I really loved having you guys all there. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it was fun.
For the benefit of listeners, Kyle, do you want to explain who the Fat Man is?
Oh, yeah. George Sanger is just a legend. I'm doing game audio because of George. It was his 7th guest soundtrack when I was trying to be a young film composer and struggling through some indie work and stuff like that. That I discovered that games had awesome music in them. And ironically, I'd already worked on a game, but it was, like I said, doing art, and I didn't see a future for myself there. But when I heard the 7th guest soundtrack, I went crazy. And then, during the Doom days, they also released Wing Commander, and he did the music for that. And we played a lot of Wing Commander. He's gone on to do amazing soundtracks and things. So and actually, he's one of the founders of Gang. He's just an amazing, amazing guy. George Sanger, the Fat Man. He's got an audiobook out that's fantastic. But better than that, I can't get over how kind he is. He's just one of the nicest guys who's always paying compliments, always listening. You never get a half conversation from George Sanger. It's just amazing. So I like to, because he's meant so much to me, I like to try to, if I can in my own way, pay it back. And I owe him a billion more dinners and a billion more hangouts. But that's my take on George Sanger.
I had the pleasure of revisiting his Wing Commander music in the form of, I guess, a re-release, like a remastered album of music from the game, which looks like it's 2 or so years old. And I hadn't heard that music since it had been released, which I'm guessing, was that the 90s? Mid-90s, maybe? Earlier?
Yeah, but early 90s.
So this
when did Doom happen? 92, 94? Right around there.
That feels about right, yeah. So this is old, is the upshot. And I listened to it, and it was all retro synth. It was all kind of wavetable orchestra. So it wasn't meant to be an emulation of an acoustic orchestra that would be recognizable. It was kind of a snapshot of the musical palette of that era, maybe remastered, maybe the reverb was modernized. I don't know. Or maybe it was literally the old masters polished up a bit. But what I really enjoyed about the Wing Commander soundtrack is how thematically driven it was, where a fairly memorable theme was laid out in the opening title and often was repurposed in many of the interior cues in interesting ways. So there was one cue I remember that was called Rec Room, which is, I assume, the music for the Rec Room. And it was kind of a lounge jazz, a kind of a humorous interpretation of the idea of the Soldier's Lounge. And it was just the main theme turned into kind of a vibraphone jazz piece. And that was really cool. It worked on its own as a piece of music so that if you didn't actually hear the main theme as a leitmotif, you'd just think it's jazz for the Rec Room. But I really appreciated the integration of the thematic ideas throughout that score. And if you can bear to listen to wavetable era, General MIDI-esque orchestral samples, you can learn a lot from listening to that score, and it's also just a lot of fun.
Indeed. Amazingly talented. When The Seventh Guest came out, it was the first time, that game was introduced at a Microsoft convention by Bill Gates himself, because they were doing some amazing things with the CD technology at the time. And this was one of the first games. It was also, in my memory, the first game that had a soundtrack CD included in the game. And so I would play the game, which was super fun anyway. But then I would go about my daily life hanging out with my friends. And I remember one particular time I was driving to a movie theater and I was playing the soundtrack. And, my friends we were all musicians at the time, playing in bands and doing stuff. And they were like, who is it? Because it had some really dark, but rock and roll pieces that were really good. And I remember playing at the time, and my friends were like, who is this? Who is this we're listening to? I said, this is a video game soundtrack. It blew people's minds. I also ran a bunch of stoplights because it was a straight road with a succession of stoplights. And I was so entranced by the music, I just ran right through a couple of them and scared the crap out of everybody in the car. So in some ways, I guess I could say the fat man almost killed me, but it wouldn't really have been his fault. Anyway, so that was dinner for us on Wednesday night. Amazing time. And then it was Thursday morning. And that morning I had insomnia. I went to bed. I got in the hotel like at midnight or something, but I couldn't go to sleep. And like 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally fell asleep. And Mike, I think you suffered from insomnia the very next night. Something was going on.
Yes, and please, this does not reflect upon the food quality at Amber India. I'm sure that was just a coincidence, but a lot of energy that goes on at GDC, and there could be a lot of things keeping you up.
It's so tough to manage things. I mean, Wednesday is one of those first nights where there's everything going on. Sure, there's a lot of stuff happening Monday and Tuesday, like the game audio meetup on Tuesday night. But Wednesday, that's when you have to make some real decisions as to, am I going to go here? Am I going to go over here? Am I going to take the bus for this event here? Google has something sponsored. Microsoft has something sponsored that night. I think I actually did a pretty good thing by deciding not to go to any of those really crazy parties. Just because reflecting back on the times when I've done that in the past, never really seemed to pan out. It's just full of conversations that are 25% heard, if that.
Yeah. I was looking through the chat list of all the heroes here, and there's so many great ones listed. But it brought to mind somebody, a friend of mine, a friend of ours, actually, Matt Pearsall, who I did not get to see this year. It really bummed me out. So, Matt, if you're watching the show, I'm a bit mad at you. Very talented guy. Great to see him listed.
So to contextualize that, Kyle in the chat room asked, "Does anyone have any game audio heroes?" And
oh yeah, sorry.
So
what people don't see the live chat room from the video later?
Yeah.
So any parties that night, Vince? Did you hit up any huge parties?
No. I mean, I knew about this Microsoft one, and I decided not to go to that one. I'm looking what else here. There was a Sonic Toad media party that I decided not to go to. Yeah, other than an IGDA function earlier in the day, I did not do any parties on Wednesday night.
You know, back in the day, parties were interesting and difficult to get. And now I see a lot of stuff happening on Eventbrite, but none of the big ones like the Microsoft party. So how do you end up getting an invitation to help people for a future year to the Microsoft party? I remember to add something here. I remember one year I went to a CCP games party, and it was only because I checked out the demo and I asked a bunch of questions, and eventually they said, "Hey, we're having a party, and would you like an invitation?" I said yes. So is it still the same? Go to the Microsoft booth or the Xbox booth and participate and possibly get an invitation?
It depends. Let's see. It's usually not by going to any booth. I mean, for me, a lot of those things are because, I worked on a game and it was actually through Microsoft or through Sony, and boom, because of that, I'm on a list and I get an invite many months before. That's usually what happens.
Oh, that's great.
I'm not sure how to help on that regard. And actually, now that I say that, I'm sorry, Sony and Microsoft, that I didn't attend the party that you gave me an invite for. I'm sure they don't mind. They invite a whole lot of people, but sometimes my ears get tired and I would like to have a more quiet conversation before ending the night.
Yeah, these are some of those parties are, I mean, the budgets for them are just off the roof. It's just crazy how much they put into these. So getting an invitation, having that kind of familiarity in the industry and doing business with them makes sense that an invitation would come months before. And getting an invitation the day of the show, I could see being a little bit difficult. But anyway, if you get a chance to go to those parties, I remember one year I went to a Microsoft party, and it was a Blade Runner theme, and they went all out. It was crazy. So they're super fun parties to go to. But I got to tell you, I didn't attend any parties. We kind of created our own buzz and just did those things. So I didn't go to anything that I signed up for on Eventbrite or got invitations to as well, Vince. So don't feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So let's keep it flying through this. We got 15 more minutes. We're at Thursday now. Now, my biggest memory of Thursday was that there weren't a lot of audio talks, and I guess I'm kind of saying that wrong. There were things that I was interested in going to see, but I had meetings that day, and that was my first day on the expo floor. Speaking of expo floor, apparently, if you went to the Amazon booth, you got like Echo Dots, which is kind of cool. And if you went to the yeah, right. I've got one, and I'm sitting here thinking, I wish I would have gotten some more.
They've been throwing those things out ever since a year ago. There would be discounts and bundles. I was just thinking, maybe I'll get some of those new smart lights for my house.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, there's a free Echo Dot that bundles. And now my house is full of, I think 5 Echo Dots.
Well done, you, man. I tell you what.
I don't know about that, honestly, because everyone, pros, cons. Pros, there are some really cool things happening in the world of Echoes, and there are some very cool audio interactive experiences that you can have on Echoes along the lines of choose your own adventures. And I think that will evolve in future years. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of Amazon sponsored talks on that subject during GDC. I did not go to those, unfortunately. Those were some of the talks that I missed on Wednesday. Nonetheless, I am looking forward to that. I am still worried about the whole privacy thing that people keep on bringing up. You do have a bunch of microphones that are now in your house and listening to stuff.
Oh, yeah. And while I was away, I actually logged into one of them, Mike will attest, and started listening to what was going on in the house. So one thing I did that neither one of you know, because I kept it completely private, and I figured I would reveal it on the show, is I got to ride a bucking unicorn while at the show, and neither one of you were there because I didn't want any pictures taken. So, but that was super fun to ride the mechanical unicorn and fall off of that thing.
I saw that thing, and I was very tempted to.
I thought you saw me on it. I was like, oh shit, please.
Oh, no. You are lucky on that. I actually did see someone hang on to that thing for close to a minute. It was like,
there was no hanging on to it for me. I just got on and fell off. It's pretty simple.
Ooh. Yeah, the expo floor. Go on.
Ahead.
No, you go.
All right, fine. I was just going to ask, was there any danger of being impaled since you're being thrown off this thing that presumably has a horn?
Well, the truth is, I called it a llama when I approached and got corrected that it was unicorn, because it's basically a unicorn without a horn is either a llama or a horse. And if the artist is good, it's a horse. But this wasn't a good artist, so we're going to go with a llama. So I called it the bucking llama because I don't play the game Fortnite. I didn't know what it was about. So they, quickly corrected me. But anyway, in essence, to keep time collected, it was super fun. There's a lot of cool things on the floor. Make sure you go early, get the cool stuff. Like Xbox was handing out some sort of Xbox controller that was unique to the show. Amazon's giving away Echo Dots, and one guy collected 3 of them. I saw online. He just kept going back each day and asking for another one, or he said each day, but I kind of think on Friday they were probably out. Lots of t-shirts. Chase at one point, I couldn't get a large t-shirt, and I'm pretty shy, so I don't like to interrupt people while they're playing. He just walks over and grabs a t-shirt, throws it through the air. Great fun, really cool stuff on the expo floor. If you get there early, definitely do it. One of the things I was most disappointed with on the expo floor, I'll be honest about, was the vomitorium. I call it, it is the Oculus booth. I call it the vomitorium because, the Oculus made me sick to my stomach anytime I messed with it. I'm sure it's better now. But I am a huge board gamer. I love board games. Out there is a closet with over 400 board games in it. I absolutely love board games. And Catan, not one of my favorites, is certainly a good crossover board game. And the Oculus booth, they set up a Catan virtual reality board game. And it just, it smacked of irony that a board game is on a table, a bunch of people are around the table to play the board game, but they've put on the Oculus Rift where they can essentially just ignore each other and not interact except through VR to play this board game, which is the exact opposite of what board games are like. But I guess I should have gotten in that hugely long line and seen if the Oculus Rift VR was worth its price in gold. But from an outsider's standpoint, it just seemed like a waste. Let's set up a board game and ignore each other and just wear glasses. So I was kind of disappointed in that. Okay. Enough on that. I had to get my.
We got to Zoom if we want to try to fit in 2 more days in less than 15 minutes.
I know, that's why I'm trying to hurry. I'm so sorry. So Thursday is, were there any good talks on Thursday? I don't remember going to any talks. Does anybody have anything?
Well, I actually didn't go to any in the morning. The first talk that I went to was in the afternoon, which was the Composer Confessions micro talk.
I went to that then. Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty good. It was basically a lot of these composers who we all know and love. Guys like Peter McConnell, who's been in the industry for years, Gordy Hobb, who's been in the industry for years, Austin Wintry, of course, who's been doing amazing stuff recently. And I don't say he's been in the industry for years just because he's only had 10 years compared to Peter McConnell's decades. So, wow. So all these great guys who are really quite great at what they do, just sort of letting other people know that either they've been human or they've learned from some very big mistakes, and here were the mistakes.
That one's called Composer Confessions Microtalk 2, More Massive, Often Painful Lessons Learned.
Yeah.
Mike, what'd you think?
I liked some of the confessionals more than others, some of them I liked very much. I don't remember who gave this one, but one composer made the point that it is important when demoing a cue idea for evaluation, pitching an idea of a cue, it is important to make the cue as well produced as possible, or as fully arranged as possible is really what he was getting at. Not so much the picking the best reverb, but to make sure that all the musical elements are represented, so that you're not relying on the imagination of a producer who may be very risk averse and their ability to envision your vision, to really give them a good slice, a vertical slice of what you're doing. I liked that one very much.
Yeah, I really like that one as well. That was Darren Korb.
Yep.
And I think he had a really nice point at the very end of that, is when you're giving a cue to someone to listen to, what are you looking to get from them? You know, if it seems like the thing they're going to tell you is, oh, it's incomplete, that doesn't really help you because it's incomplete. You know, you can actually ask yourself that question: if I'm giving something that is actually ready for some actual important, valuable feedback, something more than just, oh yeah, you need to add those things that you've been meaning to add, right?
Yeah. You know, that was great on 3 points for me. Gareth Coker was talking about how he has formed he was working too hard. He was doing everything, and he had to figure out how to delegate all of this work to be done. And he's kind of formed a team around him of friends and people that he knows can get things done, and how important that is. Gareth, a fantastic composer, great guy, and that was a really good point. Darren Korb, you brought up, Mike, about completing a full piece when you're trying to get people to dig into it, and I agree completely. And Peter O'Connell really knocked it home for me right from the beginning when he was saying something about, you know, basically don't be a jerk, you know, and he was like, we're going to name a guy and we'll just call him Peter. And here's the jerky things that he did in the early days. And that's so important. It's so important. You know, I remember learning from Ian Stocker that this is not my opus. I kept delivering to him late music, and he was like, I got to get this game turned around. And finally one day, and I'm sure under duress, he said to me, you know, Kyle, this isn't your opus. Just get the work done. And that lesson has stuck with me ever since. And I think that kind of relates back to the Peter McConnell talk, where he was saying, don't be too egotistical about the work that you're doing. That was a great talk. I agree. And it was great afterwards, because we stayed in the hallway for like an hour, if not longer, just talking to everybody. It was great. I remember Darren Korb stayed with us the whole time. What a great guy. Mm-hmm. Oh, I did want to add that Gordy Habb, that was my first time ever hearing Gordy Habb music. So I'm going to say something that's going to get me, we're just going to lose viewers right here. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world. I've never been a big fan except for the original, the first one. I haven't cared for the Star Wars after the first one. And when I heard his music, I was blown away. Being somebody who doesn't follow Star Wars or participate, I was just blown away by his ability. What an amazing composer. I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Mm-hmm. Hey, USC represent.
He really does have that John Williams sound, and that's not, and you know, it's funny because I hear temps all the time, or I hear people complaining about temps that sound like John Williams and they have to do their best John Williams. If you put what I heard at GDC against the actual Star Wars, and I guess I'm a good test study because I'm not following a lot of Star Wars, I would have trouble telling Gordy Habb from John Williams. So what an amazing talent. So what happened after that?
Wow. More Thursday night shenanigans.
What did we do Thursday night?
I think, well, in terms of actual GDC, I went to the Scottish game developers shindig, where there was wonderful finger foods and alcohol and pitches from a number of interesting Scottish games. And that concluded my productive activity that day, though there's quite a bit of activity after that of the non-productive variety.
Well, yeah, and Michael Hoffman has said, and by the way, Mike, I'm still mad at you about going to the Scottish Games thing. By the way, their booth had a stack of business cards in a little binder, a little like 3-ring miniature thing. It was great. That was well done by them. Michael Hoffman, and I'm just busting through. I'm so sorry, guys, to rush this. Michael Hoffman mentioned the Gang Awards. Yep. I stayed the whole time. It went a lot. It wasn't as long as it used to be in the years past. The last time I was there was 3 years ago. The big winners that stand out to me, there were 3 big winners. Go ahead.
I mean, Call of Duty cleaned up.
Will Roger just kicked butt, and as well as other Call of Duty awards were presented. And what's the Guerrilla Games one? I haven't played it. Zero.
Horizon.
Zero Dawn, right? Great game. Great game. I mean, great sounds. They won a bunch of awards, and everything I heard sounded great. But then there was a lady who wasn't there who when they first started, she was nominated for a bunch of categories, and I'm so sorry, guys. Maybe you can remind me what the game was. She was nominated for a bunch of categories and lost at the beginning. Lost to the big ones.
Are you talking about for So Let Us Melt?
Yes.
Because
yes.
Jessica Curry was not able to be there, but Jessica Curry is fantastic, and I love her scores, including So Let Us Melt, which was nominated multiple times for the evening.
It was, and every time it came up, I was like, "Oh, that sounds really good. I hope it wins," and it would lose. And then it came up again. Oh, I hope it wins, and it would lose. And then suddenly it came up and won. It came up and won. It came up and won. And well done, Jessica Curry. That sounded really great. And you know, everybody who's winning these awards are doing amazing work. There's no doubt about it. And you know, Will Roget, one of the nicest guys in the industry. I remember him quite a few years ago, and just such a talented guy. Cuphead won an award. That's right. Thank you, Michael Hoffman. And I have, you know, being a guy who studied jazz performance, I have a real love for Cuphead. So I was disappointed that it didn't win more awards, but I felt that the award it had won was deserving. Richard Jakes got Lifetime Achievement, and boy, does he deserve that. Well done, Richard Jakes. And yeah, I think I'm just in essence of keeping track of time. I think that about covers the Gang Awards. Excuse me.
Yeah. So that happened Thursday night. I guess we can move on to Friday. There was, of course, the last morning of Sight Glass Coffee, which I was not able to make.
I was there, and it was just as fun as usual, and good. I really got to see the, you know, there's a new guard here, if I can take a moment. And it's funny because I was talking to Gerard about this, and we were the new guard when the Game Audio people were Clint Bajakian and Peter McConnell and the Fat Man and everything, and you know, and now we're kind of, at least, you know, gosh, I'm trying to find. I don't want to say this wrong because I certainly don't want to be misconstrued, but there's a bevy of new people coming into Game Audio, and it's fantastic. And well done them. There's quite a future ahead for Game Audio, and you can see that throughout GDC the whole time. Well done. And Sight Glass on Friday, I talked to a lot of new people and a lot of talented people. Well done. I guess
I'm looking
might have
at
come
Friday.
out. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to keep on going because we only have a few minutes left.
I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try to push, but
Friday there was so much stuff that was scheduled that I did not go to. So I'm just going to point out the 1:30 time slot. So we had Damien and PDX and Will Roget talking about audio. Their whole thing was going from a full-time employee to becoming freelance, and that was exciting. And my GDC app crashed. So that was at 1:30. What else was at 1:30?
I think that was pretty much it. There wasn't really anything.
Yeah, there's nothing. Before you reveal,
making good tools for making great audio. So I really want to talk about that. I mean, that was audio programming. I could not go to that. There was also another talk from Sandy Schneiders and John Rod talking about strategies for preventing or rescuing a lousy orchestral recording session. So, wow, all these great audio talks happening at 1:30. Super frustrating for an audio or music composer like me.
Well, what else happened at 1:30, Vince?
What else happened? Yeah, there was another talk that was going on. So I wrangled up a couple of people to talk about musicians working with other musicians, specifically in a remote capacity, working with remote instrumentalists, remote orchestras, remote mixing. And Kyle, you helped me out on that, as well as instrumentalists Kristen Nagus and Jeff Ball. And we had some fun talking on the expo floor to an audience of Well, mostly newcomers to the video game industry. Also, some students there as well.
And an opera
It was a
singer.
fun time. There was the opera singer. That was actually very fun to listen to. It's super cool, the alt control happening at the GDC Expo floor.
So the expo floor talks are in this like glass booth, and thank you, Vince. It was super fun, and I felt that we put on a really good talk. Not just me. I shouldn't say it like that because it suggests that maybe I'm being defensive. I heard only good things from all the people that attended. And we probably filled half the house, which is really good for an expo floor talk. But it was beside a booth that had a game that the louder you sang, the more you controlled, like some sort of paddle or something. So we were interjected by this opera singer that we just the person who obviously worked at the company, because it was the same voice over and over, kept testing the game for people and being very operatic about it. And it was kind of funny to talk and hear that opera singer. But somebody must have said something, because after about a quarter away, maybe a little bit further into our talk, the person wasn't there at all. But now back to the talk. It was a great talk, Vince. It was a great subject about, I'm trying to surmise it, so please correct me where I'm wrong. But it was a great talk about what it's like to build a soundtrack, orchestral, and work with people outside of the box. Outside of the box being a computer. Of course, you can do a bunch of mock-ups and you can do a bunch of writing there, but still to incorporate maybe a solo violinist or an oboist. And then I spent some time talking about, and Vince was very complimentary about guitar. Thank you very much. And then I spent some time talking about mixing it all together. And because a lot of people don't think about using a third-party mixer to get this stuff done and how helpful that can be. So using outside instrumentalists can be helpful. Running your composition past another composer can be so helpful. And, Vince was really touching on all those points with this talk, and I appreciate being part of it.
Yeah, no problem. It would have been so difficult to do this by myself. It just seemed only logical. The whole thing, the impetus for the talk is just, it's so easy as a musician to be the only one to listen to something before it gets in the game. That happens on so many games, especially smaller games and indie games. People are just like, yeah, the music's fine. Go ahead and put it in. There it is. You do some Unity hooks, it's in the game. Boom, it's done. Compared to almost everything else that's happening, where other people are looking at and thinking about, and even editing and manipulating game design systems or art, pixel art, or maybe even more complicated art, where you have animators working with riggers, working with the modelers, working with texture artists, and all that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
It was a great talk, and I look forward to maybe revisiting it later. It wasn't on the vault though, right? Because they didn't record it.
Right. It was
so
not
it won't be on the vault, I should say.
Yeah. Well, it would be hard to record with that opera singer in tow.
Chase says that it was Elizabeth Zaroff and Bonnie Bogovich.
Oh, Bonnie Bogovich. Oh, really?
Bogovich. Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's really funny.
Well, hey, I watch Elizabeth, by the way, has a show called something about singers. I can't remember what it is. I watch every episode. And why I really want to promote it, but I know I don't have time to have dead air and dig up what the link is. So if anybody can remember it, please let me know in the chat room. But she has a great show about singing and voices. It's like The Enchanted Voice or something like that. If you get a chance to check it out on YouTube, just search her on YouTube. Great show. Really a lot of information about writing for different voice types. So Friday night, what did we do? So we'll wrap up here. So we had our 1:30 talk, and then that turned into the annual game audio hour dinner at House of Nanking, which is a super fun thing to do. And we took we had a party of 6 or 7. It was really nice. It was perfect because we got a table. The charismatic voice. Yes, thanks, Chase. That is Elizabeth Zaroff's show on YouTube. But we had a great dinner at the House of Nanking, and then right around the corner from there is my favorite place to get a drink in San Francisco, which is it's a bar called Vesuvio. It's got this cool upstairs. It's very beat generation. It's on Jack Kerouac Alley. It was super fun there. And then we left there and we went to the California Pizza Kitchen because there was a bunch of game audio people there. Did you get a chance to go to that, Vince?
No, I didn't. I got to admit, I decided to relax a bit. And this is what I did for my Friday night. Yeah. I don't know if you can see this, but it's just a picture of some dudes, and we are hanging out in a hotel room playing some
dudes,
really
not nudes.
Dudes. I did say dudes. Although I should mention, yes, there were plenty of ladies there as well. So I should more accurately say various people who were at GDC. We relaxed in a hotel room and played video games, especially really dumb, really bad, possibly not even worth releasing out to the public video games. So, yeah, Beethoven's Second was
Is
one
that
of them.
based off of the TV or the movie
Based
Beethoven?
on the movie, exactly. It was
It's shameful.
it was surprisingly fun. You know, it makes for great performance art. Let's just
And
say
where was
that.
this? Somebody's hotel room? It looks like you've got a big screen.
It was basically just someone's hotel room. You know,
Gotcha.
Hey,
Is it-
cool. Company's got a hotel room. Let's do some stuff.
It must be a company hotel room because look at all the whiskey in the back.
Exactly. But who cares about that when you can get perfectly drunk on the wonder of Beethoven's Second?
Ah, all right. Well, so we left there, and just to wrap up, we went to after California Pizza Kitchen, we went to Smuggler's Cove and had a blast. Get a chance to go there; it was pretty cool. Hung out with Gerard and Sarah and a bunch of game audio people, and some people writing some orchestral stuff for UCLA, doing game kind of a VGL, but happening at UCLA. A lot of great people. And then we left there and found our ways home and found our ways on Saturday back to our respected living places and called it a successful GDC. So great talks, great people, great times. It's what GDC is all about. I haven't been there in 2 years. I don't want to make that mistake again. That's the longest break I've ever taken from GDC. Mike, thanks for traveling with me. I know that that all of my singing of Britney Spears songs in the car can be a little overwhelming, but you handled it with grace. Appreciate it.
Took a lot of Advil to get through that.
and a seat heater. I always put that in reverse. Mike put my car's seat heater on like 5 on the way up, and I think it was 3 on the way down. It just left it on the whole time.
When you live in Southern California for long enough, you just lose your acclimatization to cold, and you just need a constant bubble of warm air wherever you travel.
It was fine. It was fun too. So, Vince, did you drive up?
I did. Driving up, driving down. It was fun. I like being able to relax, and it's actually a pretty relaxing drive. No crazy traffic. I can stop by Harris Ranch and pick up some really fresh produce and a nice steak to refresh myself on the way back.
Is Harris Ranch on the 5?
It is on the 5 in Coalinga. It's almost exactly between San Francisco and LA. So it's a very nice natural stopping point.
I drag Mike on the 101 every time. Well, guys, it's been a little bit of an extended show, but it's a lot to cover, and I appreciate everybody sticking around and adding to the chat room of all the awesome things that they saw. And with that, I guess I'll just say goodbye. And follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. I think that covers it.
Instagram?
I don't think we have a Game Audio Hour Instagram. If we do, I didn't set it up, and it could be very bad pictures. Here's what these idiots are doing. Don't watch that. It's Kyle on a unicorn. I don't want to see that.
Ooh, I love it.
All right, I'm going to hang up. I'll see you guys later.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Good night.